Hello, my name is Isaac Sharp, and this is my final presentation video for the Synoptic Gospels class. First, we're going to talk about the very nature of the Synoptic Gospels themselves and how they're different from the Gospel of John. The Synoptic Gospels are basically doing like a narrative of Jesus' life. They're focused more on like short parables and stories of the miracles that Jesus did. And while the Gospel of John mostly has like a lot of long discourse that Jesus was preaching on, and it's very heavy-handed, especially, of course, in John 1 about the divinity and the deity of Jesus. And while that is there in the Synoptic Gospels as well, it's more heavily emphasized in the Gospel of John. Some people or some critics might question whether the Gospel of John was created to twist what Jesus had said or twist what the other Gospels had said about Jesus in relation to him actually being God instead of just a good man or a prophet. But we see, even in the Synoptic Gospels, clear examples of the divinity of Jesus. One of my favorite examples of this is when Jesus heals a paralytic man. And he was talking to the man, and he says, or he was saying to the people around him, like, what is easier? Is it easier to say to a man, your sins are forgiven, or to say, rise, pick up your mat, and walk? And they were thinking that only God has the authority to forgive sins. There's no authority given to man that can forgive sins. But Jesus said, so that you know that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins, rise, pick up your mat, and walk. And they were so angry about the blasphemy that they thought Jesus had just did, because he made himself an equal with God and taking for himself the authority to forgive sins, which is just a clear claim of divinity on Jesus' parts. And we find that in the Gospel of Mark, where some people would say that there is no example of Jesus claiming to be God, but we have it right there. And there's other examples as well, but there's one of the main objections answered. And then another thing that people ask quite often is, how can we trust that the gospel narratives are true? Or how can we know that these guys weren't just some self-serving people trying to make stories up about a guy that they were walking with? And one of the great ways that we know that we can trust these gospels is that they are eyewitness accounts. So these accounts were made by people who saw these things themselves, or they were recounting to the writers the stories of people that saw these things themselves. So they were there, they were seeing these miraculous things done that would stand out in their minds. And more importantly, these accounts were written in the lifetimes of eyewitnesses, meaning that if there was something that was just completely out of the blue, or if there was something completely out of left field, there were people alive at the time that can go back and say, no, it didn't actually happen that way. Here's what actually happened. They can correct themselves that way. Another reason is that time and time again in these synoptic gospel narratives, the disciples are made to look like absolute fools, or made to look like people that are only in it for themselves. When John and his brother came and asked if they could be sat at the right hand of Jesus in the kingdom that is to come, or their mom did that. And then Jesus corrects them. And then time and time again, we see with Peter being corrected for saying that he will never deny Christ, or saying that, far from it, this happened to you, Lord. And Jesus says to Peter, get behind me, Satan. And it's just this thing of where if the disciples were doing this, not trying to be honest in these recounts, it'd be very easy to leave these embarrassing footnotes about themselves out of the accounts. But they don't. They show up time and time again. And that's a helpful point to their validity. And how do we read the synoptics? We don't just read the synoptics like we would any biography. It's actually a genre of ancient biography, to where it's when you see the quotation marks, we would think as Americans here in the 2000s is that would be word for word exactly what Jesus said. But the differentiation in the gospel accounts of these times is that this is an ancient biography, and it's more capturing the idea of what Jesus said in these many sermons that he gave, and it's accurate in that way. Jesus worked in parables and miracles to more easily relate his message to the people that were following him so that he would take complex things about the law, make them simple to them, and show his power through miracles. And Jesus did that time and time again, and it's shown to be a very powerful way of connecting with people, not only back then, but also miracles happen today, and it's a way to connect people to the message and make it very real to them. So thank you for watching the video, and I hope you have a wonderful day.